Well, gentlemen, thanks for making your way out here to 160 Studios in Delray Beach. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Morel, so probably a incredibly impactful organization, especially with the Hercules platform.
Yeah.
But it's not like right down the middle of medtech as most people look at it.
No.
And we've had a great opportunity to become partners with you. And that's why I'm excited to have you in studio today about the organization. So JP, why don't you take us in first and about Morel and what the technology represents and what drew you to it, because you and I knew each other for quite a while, and when you called me and said, listen, I'm off the market, I'm like, what? And you told me where you're going. I said, all right, you need to explain this to me. So.
Yeah, absolutely, happy to. So what drew me to Morel was really the problem that the technology solved. So the first thing I heard about it was talk to nurses, talk to caregivers, and it was a technology that really solved an unmet need for them, which was allowing them to safely boost patients. And the more and more nurses I talked to, 100% of them said, if I had this, this would make my job better, solve problems, make me happier, allow me to care for patients better. So then I started checking the other boxes of, okay, what else is there? Economically, does this make sense for a hospital? Yes, that makes sense. Strategically, if they have this, does this make sense I can tout this versus other hospitals to recruit more talent? So the more and more boxes I looked at, it checked every box in terms of serving a need for the customer, which is the nurse. And when you think about technology, there aren't that many technologies that are designed to help solve problems for nurses, which is the scarcest resource in healthcare. So the more and more I learned about the opportunity, I said, wow, this really makes good sense. And then when you talk about the people side of it, that's the part that really was the icing on the cake, was that I had a chance to meet Bill and understand his family legacy and history and innovation. And I said, as a small, high-growth startup company, essentially, you have the backing of this tradition and history of innovation that really eliminates some of the risk that you would find in a small startup type company. And it was a no-brainer for me. So super excited about it and glad more and more people are learning about us.
We're going to dig in, and I want to get Bill to you first. But Kevin, your take on the organization, what is it about it that makes it so unique and exciting?
Yeah, so I mean, as you'll hear from Bill in a little bit, the organization has a rich history of success and innovation and technology, but I think what we're doing right now is bringing the right talent to the table to help us scale this technology across a lot of different health systems. You know, when JP had reached out to me about this opportunity, it hit home because my mother ended her nursing career actually patient handling. And I understand the problem pretty intricately, but understanding the value that we can bring to healthcare right now, knowing that what's top of mind to health systems is workforce optimization, nurse retention, there's a much broader impact that we can make. So just building out a really robust team to really get that message clear to the market is what I'm excited about.
And there's quite a legacy here. So I wanted to finish off at least the opening with you, because the Hill-Rom name and the Hill-Rom organization, and there's a history to how your family actually changed the way hospitals operate.
Yeah, well, that started with my grandfather, but I can't really talk about my grandfather until I talk about my great-grandfather. He built a successful business in our community, and he saw the need for, we needed good health care, and wanted to start a hospital in our town. And so he tasked my grandfather to talk with the local archbishop, which was in St. Louis, Missouri, to ask about a clergy and nuns to run a hospital we were going to build. So he went down to St. Louis, met with the archbishop, did the pitch, said, you know, we're looking for a clergy and nuns, and the archbishop essentially said, I can get you a clergy and nuns, but I think you're crazy to start a hospital. He said, hospitals where people go to die, people just don't go seek care. Doctors are visiting homes, and so he came back, told his father. He said, Dad, I can get a clergy and nuns, but it doesn't seem like the path forward for us. And then he spent some time thinking about it and really understanding the hospital. At that time, the rooms were wards, and so you would have anywhere between 8 or 28 beds in a room, maybe separated by curtains. And then he set out to advocate for private and semi-private rooms, got involved politically, and petitioned the federal government that if we're going to help fund advanced healthcare across our country, we need to move to private and semi-private rooms. And, you know, he coined this phrase, you know, we need to bring the home into the hospital, make it feel like a home setting. So that's how it started.
And that organization, I mean, is legendary in medical device. I mean, it is the subset of every patient who's in a room of care, whether it's a hospital, outpatient surgery center, even emergency room, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, he started in 1929. He started out innovating, you know, with a hospital bed, a standard hospital bed, but he wanted, you know, at that time, hospital beds were made out of cold rolled steel, so they were not inviting or warm to the touch. And so he really thought about making beds out of wood, really headboards and footboards. And then from there, it started the innovation. He was the first one to attach side rails to a hospital bed. And it wasn't really just the aha of attaching side rails to a hospital bed. He saw how the nurses were working. So if you had a patient who was in bed that was at risk for a fall, the nurse would have to walk down the stairs to the biomed department, check out a pair of side rails, and go upstairs and attach them to the bed. And he's like, you know, nurses work too hard. Let's just attach the side rails to a hospital bed. And the innovations, you know, really started from there. So there's been a lot of innovation over time, from that to putting scales into beds, you know, beds that you could shoot x-rays through, so the nurse didn't have to take the patient out to have those services done. And, you know, he had a vision for what healthcare was or needed to be. But it was probably more than just his innovations, because some of those were his innovations, but it was all around a culture that he established at Hillrom. And we were the innovative leader. We essentially, I don't want to say owned the hospital, the patient room.
Dominated is a fair word.
But yeah, we did. And had a significant market share for 40 or 50 years.
So you've got this great legacy and this obviously multi-generational story. Where's Hercules come in?
Well, I spent 15 years of my life working at Hillrom. I spent 5 in sales, 5 in marketing, and 5 in operations. And while I was there, we would do these, you know, kind of elaborate surveys every 2 years with our customers. And we would ask some really open-ended questions, like, you know us, we're in the patient room, what else should we be doing? And this was like, you know, a couple thousand nurses that were part of the survey. And they all responded. Number 1, make my job easier. Number 2, make my job safer. And number 3, figure out how to pull a patient up in bed. It's our biggest challenge. You know, the company, Hillrom, set out to solve that problem. Got a product to the beta stage, and it just didn't work. The product worked, but it was just a little too complicated. So they didn't commercialize it. And then Stryker followed them, because you could follow their patents and their patent strategy of what they were going to do. They followed them too. And at that time, our family was out of the business, out of the day-to-day management. And they decided to put the project on the shelf. Like, you know, we tried it, didn't work, let's move on to something else. And that's not the mentality like that my father would have had, who was the CEO of Hillenbrand Industries, which Hillrom was a subsidiary of. And he would be like, you know what, we didn't succeed that first time around, but here's some, you know, more money. Let's go figure out and solve the problem. So, and then that's where Hercules came from. The whole idea of that we had to figure out how to, you know, simply reposition a patient in bed.
Kevin, you're a career med tech guy.
Yeah.
And when we think about Hercules, and you step back for a second, and you've been primarily focused on the patient, most of the things you saw, and both you and JP's focused on the patient. How did you first look at this and process this in your head? I know you mentioned your mom was, you know, a nurse and handled the patient a lot. But when you look at this, what is it that stood out, and what are you seeing in the marketplace today that has Hercules being gobbled up so quick? Because your growth, and we'll give JP that opportunity, but your growth has been tremendous the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my background over the past 17 years, I've worked with device companies, robotics, AI SaaS companies, and some of the more successful exits that I've had and some of the startups that I've been a part of, fortunately, have been really those novel solutions. So when you look at what we're solving for, it's a very novel approach to leveraging automation to take care of a very time-consuming, laborious task that the nursing workforce has to do. So when I evaluated the company, there was the leadership in place, but there was also really the hot topics that every CEO, CNO, CNE is really focused on right now, which is how do we attract nurses to the bedside, because the outlook is really bad. So in 2027, 42 out of 50 states are going to be understaffed with nurses. And there's going to be about a 10% reduction in nursing workforce by 2027. That's frightening. It's frightening now. It's really frightening then. So how do we help them through automation, give them time back, make the bedside more attractive? That is really the question that every CEO, CNO, CNE is really trying to focus on the most. And we have a unique way to strategically create that attraction. So, you look at the number one problem in healthcare being the shortage. I feel like we have a really good value impact there.
And JP, your growth's been pretty tremendous. You'd like to say since you got there, but it's been pretty tremendous. Tell me about that growth, and how do you look at the market coming from a pure device play now to really impacting the nursing population more than anything else, and obviously the patient, because the patient benefits from this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the assessment when I was looking at the opportunity is that what is the total addressable market? And very rarely with innovative technologies, the total addressable market is everybody. Everybody with a bed and a nurse is a target and is able to benefit from this technology. So really our vision of every bed in a hospital should have this, that's a real potential. So when we look at the market, and we've just started to scratch the surface, so yes, we've had unbelievable growth, and Bill and team before me had set a really great foundation that we just really needed to mobilize and accelerate. And that's really what we've done the last year. We had 200% year-over-year growth last year. We had a record year. We're projecting much larger even growth this year. And that's really driven by a couple different things. Number one, the clinical impact that technology is having. Reference sites, we're in over 500 hospitals across the country, large academic to small community hospital and everything in between. So that you have a lot of reference sites that customers can call and say, hey, what has been your impact? What has been the experience you've had with that? So that's number one. Number two, I think we've helped put together a strong business case for the facility for nursing leaders to be able to talk to other executives within the hospital to help them understand this is more than just a patient automation repositioning device. This impacts so many other portions of the hospital. So that is starting to make sense where the ROI is really wide reaching within the hospital. And then lastly, the third point is that through introducing methodologies with time-driven activity-based costing and creating operational efficiency, we're now pulling in standardization discussions where instead of saying, hey, we want this in one department, we need this in all departments in a hospital. And we had a hospital system last year, 13 hospital IDN, integrate this technology on every bed. So 1,500 beds at one time. So that pressure tested, could we do this? And we did it. And now others are looking at that as, hey, we can do that now. And we're just there to support it.
So the technology, Bill, simply put, explain how the technology works.
It wasn't really from like a simple aha moment. You used to lay in bed at night and try to figure out how you could move a patient up in bed, and it came from the concept of an automated pool cover that my parents have at their house. You turn a key, the pool opens, you turn it the opposite directions, and it closes. And then the whole idea is, well, how do you take that concept and apply it to a hospital bed mattress? So there's a little drive motor underneath the head section of the mattress that we attach our sheet to. Our sheet is twice as long as a standard sheet, and there's clips along the sides of the mattress that just help guide the sheet as it's being advanced. And when there's a patient on the bed, a nurse simply walks in and pushes two buttons, and the patient is boosted up in bed. And then the length of the sheet is purposeful. It's 16 feet long. That allows you to get through about a day and a half or 2 days of boosting. So that's about the same amount of time as a standard sheet change. And so we didn't really want to change their process at all. And so that's how the product works.
So Kev, you probably have this number. How much time does it take, and how many people does it take for a standard sheet change versus the Hercules platform?
Yeah, so standard sheet change, I would say, is not the important measure. It's really how long does it take to boost a patient manually. So if you think about it, nurse has to stop what they're doing. They have to find help. Help could be one to three other nurses, depending upon the size of the patient. They have to stop what they're doing. then they ultimately get to that patient to do a patient reposition. That happens across the staffing ratio, the staff to patient ratio. Then they got to return the favor to their counterparts. Every nurse today is spending over 77 minutes per 12-hour shift just on boosting patients. So it's a big time killer. And JP referenced time-driven activity-based costing earlier. That's a cost accounting methodology that is really being applied more so in healthcare now than ever, as we're really trying to get nurses and other clinicians to perform at the top of their license. So if you think about really that amount of time spent on an activity that's tied to the number on workman's comp claim, by the way, could we actually be shifting that through redesign with Hercules to use that 77 minutes towards top of license performance? And that's exactly where we're at right now. And that's where we're having this aha moment with healthcare executives. It's a real redesign impact through automation.
And you're building a sales organization right now as we speak, right?
Yep.
So those that are interested, saying, this sounds interesting to me, what can you share with us about that today?
Probably makes me the happiest because when I first got here, I put a slide up in front of the sales team at the mid-year meeting, and I said, here's the vision, is that we will create the top medical device sales force in the industry where people will be lining up to say, I want on the team. And probably for a moment, people probably said, you might be a little crazy. But we're seeing that because we're getting people like Kevin and others joining the team that have great reputations with other innovative technologies. And we've created an environment through Bill's support to create a culture that we empower people to be successful and create a fun environment, that it's a high performance team, but we have a lot of fun, we keep it loose, but we're solving a great problem, so the impact is there. The talent wants to be on board. It's really the perfect timing for everything, so couldn't be better.
Bill, when you think about culture as we finish up here, clearly you've built a very, very unique, interesting culture and a family legacy. Does lessons learned from the past, some of your own sprinkling on top, and then hiring and bringing other great people on the team. What do you think of when you add team members?
You know, you talk about culture, and you hear this saying, culture eats strategy any day of the week, and it does. And we build it to where we cross-collaborate. We're always, when you're doing something and you're changing people's lives, changing nurses' lives, there's nurses, if you look at the statistics, they don't stay at the bedside long. And one of the leading components to that is the physical burnout and the wear and tear on their bodies. And so we're helping solve a lot of that. So I think when you have the right mission, you have the right team, it creates a culture that that there's such alignment and excitement. So yeah.
And if I could add one thing to that in terms of the gratitude that we feel from our customers on the impact that the technology makes. I've never been around a technology where you walk down the hallway and they literally are running out of the room to high five you, say, thank you for bringing this to my hospital. Yeah. And yes, I've been involved with other great technologies that are changing lives with oncology and things like that. And that's also very important, but this is just different. Yeah. And it reminds me of the early days of like interventional pulmonology with like navigational bronchoscopy. It's like those folks were like thanking us as we were helping them bring this technology to their patients. It's the same way with nurses, and there's a special feel to that. It's hard to describe.
But I can see that because if you're a pure device person, you were usually selling to a, let's call it an interventionalist or a surgeon, and they have a different mindset of their surrounding than the nurse. And I think the nurse has more embedded gratitude in them that they're willing to pay out maybe than I'm saying this, you guys aren't saying this, than maybe a surgeon or interventionalist, right? Who tend to have an entire kingdom around them serving them, right? So it's really interesting switch on your customer base, and I love to hear that.
It's an interesting switch, and I think, JP, mentioned it. We become really close to our customer, the CNO. We align so well with everything that the majority of things that they're trying to solve for, which is the number one operational cost in a hospital is that nursing workforce. And so, we're having a huge impact, and that motivates people. So.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, gentlemen, thanks for coming in and sharing the story around Morel and Hercules platform.
absolutely, Joe.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.